Hello and welcome to the First Generation College Experience. I am so thrilled that you all are here with us today because we have amazing guests. We are Grand Canyon University's Canyon Professional Development. And without further ado, I'm going to have our first expert introduce himself. We're going to talk about First Gen, and Jaron, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about just your titles right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jaron Tubbs. I'm a coordinator for Canyon Professional Development, do educational development and special projects. Got a bachelor's degree in justice studies with a minor in public admin from GCU, graduated in December 2020. On the slide there is my contact information. So if you have any questions or anything you'd like to reach out about, please feel free.
Thank you so much, Jaron. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we're going to hear more about your story in just a second, but just wanted to make sure that you had an introduction here with those awesome titles. We have another expert, also a first generation student. Jocelyn, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi all, my name is Jocelyn. At the current moment, I am also a coordinator here with Canyon Professional Development, working in the educational development and special projects. I have two titles at the moment of obtained bachelor's in communication from ASU in 2019 and a recent master's in communication with an emphasis in education from here at GCU this past October.
Fantastic. And you can see that Jocelyn also has her contact information there. So if anyone needs that information, go on back through the video and you can check that out. I am so proud of both of these individuals. I am honored to work with both of them, and I'm excited to share their stories with you. I also want to introduce Marette Hahn, who is on the call here today. You're going to hear from her a little bit later. But before we get too far into her expertise, Marette, would you kick us off with our quote today and tell us why it's significant?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Corey. So I really identify with this quote, which I have found in my studies on first generation college students. And really, I think it so beautifully describes the importance of not just access to higher education, but ensuring that once students arrive on a college or university campus, that institution is doing everything it can to make sure the student is successful. There are a lot of incredible first generation college students pursuing degrees. I think a lot of people understand that many of them won't make it. And really, I think this is a great opportunity for us to step up as educators to ensure that we're setting up our students for success throughout their K-12 experience. And then, of course, also once they land on a university campus.
You know, and Marette Hahn is the Director of Academic and Career Excellence here at Grand Canyon University. Marette, I am so excited that not only are you impacting college students' lives every single day, but you're also studying first gen students and you're about ready to get your doctorate degree in this area. So I know you have more to share with us as we move through this presentation. So thank you so much, Marette, for being with us as well. Folks, we're going to talk about our goals today. And this first gen experience, you're going to hear stories from two very different perspectives from Jaron and Jocelyn. You're also going to get some tips and tools for K-12 educators and leaders who prepare first generation students for the college experience. Also, Marette's going to sum it all up with the GCU approach to first gen success and maybe some paradigm shifting in here. Folks, enjoy the rest of this presentation. And as I move into it, I want you to look at these two images. The one on the left really has to do with an immigrant feeling as they move into our K-12 free and fair education. Now, I will say that the mother and the daughter behind is really sharing the story of maybe not yet in this country fully because their family experience is different, but also not in their home country. So there's an immigrant experience with many first gens, not all, but heck, we're all immigrants from some point. So it may be down the line. Also the graduation cap here. I love this concept of we're pulling ourselves up, we're falling down the ladder, we're coming back up. And this first gen experience is really about that. We need to help our first gen students navigate the college landscape. And we're going to talk specifically about how we can do that. And I think the best way to do it is to jump right in with Jaron's story. And Jaron, if you could just tell us a little bit about your first gen story, I think the audience would love to know. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you. So as Corey noted, I'm a first generation college student. I come from a small rural community here in Arizona. None of my family ever attended college. Nobody in my friend group really attended college. So I kind of broke out on my own in this sense. Growing up, college was never something that I expected for my life. It was never something I thought I would do. Not because I didn't think it was attainable, but it just wasn't on my radar. I didn't grow up surrounded by college educated people. It was just completely foreign to me. Going through high school, I was, kind of exploring different paths and what the future would look like. And my parents had always told me that one of their greatest regrets in life was not pursuing a college education. So that was something that they instilled in me, and something that they made clear that they would like for me to try to pursue. Towards the end of high school, I did that. I went about pursuing it. Applied to Grand Canyon University and got accepted, which was incredibly exciting, but it was also incredibly daunting. These were truly, uncharted waters. Nobody that I had in my immediate social circle or family circle knew how to apply for student aid, or what it was like to get into the dorms. So this was something that I had to figure out kind of as I went along. I was very fortunate that they were supportive and came alongside my family and friends and helped me. But there's only so much help you can provide when you're not familiar with something. So I really relied a great deal on my university counselor that kind of helped me through that admissions process. And really applying myself in high school was ultimately what was able to make me attend college. So that's kind of a little bit of how I ended up in college. Coming from a family of factory workers and farmers, it was definitely foreign to me. And it's not to diminish, that background, but it's just it was a whole new world. So it was incredibly exciting, but it was also, incredibly daunting. And I'm beyond grateful to have had the experience and to be where I'm at today.
I'm so excited for you to tell us that story, Jaron, and thank you. And I'm also interested in how your experience was once you got to college. You said it's incredibly daunting, but I do know that with that daunting piece, you've got some tips that you can share with our K12 educators to maybe improve the experience for our first gen students.
Yeah. So for me, college was very daunting. I come from a place where we don't have a sidewalk, we don't have a stoplight. It's dirt roads. It's a small town. So, the role that teachers can play in students' lives is incredibly impactful. So the first thing is encouraging students. Encouraging them to reach out beyond that which is familiar to them. Try to pursue things that they don't think are attainable. Try to pursue dreams and chase dreams. However cliche it might sound, it's the truth. Unless there's that spark that's lit, they're not going to want to pursue those dreams and chase those goals. That kind of leads into the second one, which is telling students to seize opportunities, regardless of if those opportunities seem large or small. Whether it's getting involved with a club or taking more initiative in an after school program or applying yourself more in an academic setting. Seize all those opportunities, because you don't know what kind of doors they might open in the future. If it's a career post high school, or if it's scholarship opportunities if you're on the path to go to college. You never know what doors those might open. And the next one would be utilizing resources. It depends on where you're at, but as high school students, there's a lot of resources that are available. You have your high school counselors, you have your teachers. If you have your teachers, these are people who've been in that situation of going to college. They're very familiar with it. They have experience that they can relay to you as a student that might help you navigate the process. And the fourth one is one that kind of hits close to home and is personal to me, and that's stepping out of your comfort zone. You come from, like me, a small place, a rural place. It's very, very easy to kind of be lulled into that. And again, it's not to diminish it and it's not to downplay it, but it's very easy to get lulled into that which is familiar and that which is comfortable. It takes a lot more courage, and it takes a lot more decisiveness to step out of that comfort zone and do something unfamiliar. So I think encouraging students to do that which is unfamiliar, to step out of that comfort zone and do the difficult task, because it's very, very easy to get lulled into a comfortable pattern of behavior, and it takes a lot more work to step out of that and and take some initiative.
Thank you so much, Jaron. And I know that you have that initiative because I'm just excited to be able to work with you. And sometimes I think that now that I know you're a first gen student, maybe some of those experiences have helped you to be so on the fly with what you do at work, because we're changing. We have to be flexible all the time here.
Absolutely.
So I commend you for that. And we'll definitely have more conversation about first gen students, but I wanted to just show a graphic here talking about like your experience there where you're maintaining your home life. I heard you say a couple of times, it's not to diminish the farmers and the factory workers that that I come from, but you have to maintain that, right? Like you have to make sure that you're not like, oh, smarty pants, whatever, up in college. Am I correct in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so ironic because, if you look at the outside world, so to speak, a lot of urban communities, that's the path is you graduate high school, you go to college. That's not the case, in where I grew up, and that's not the case for tons of communities across this country that are, flyover states, so to speak. The norm is you graduate high school and you go to work. That's just the trajectory. And to break away from that, it does go against the grain. It was weird to graduate high school and to have people go, "Oh, you're going to college," and kind of the way that they said it was definitely not what you would expect. So
I love that you say that. So you work towards opportunity that maybe wasn't, portrayed as valuable in your community, but you work towards that opportunity. And then once you got to college, you said it yourself, uncharted territory. It was unknown. And so you needed that support perhaps, but asking for it was probably challenging in a sense because you had never done that before. Nobody in your family knew how to ask for that support. And I venture to say that college professors are probably not number one in saying, here's the 95 ways we can support you.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's nothing to say about college professors in a negative sense. It's just, that's not how we do it at college. So that college knowledge piece is going to be super important. You were about to say something, Jaron?
Yeah, I mean, well, for someone like me who was at the time, incredibly unfamiliar with the college process, getting into college, going through classes, you really bank on the support of, professors and academic faculty. You really rely on them to help you. Not because you're not capable of, accomplishing those tasks on your own, but because you genuinely don't know the process.
We're going to get into that a little bit later. Yes, college professors, watch out. Marette Hahn's going to talk to us a little bit more about that. Before we do, Jocelyn, I know you have a very different story than Jaron. And Jaron, I want to thank you very much for your story, and we'll come back and have some conversation. But Jocelyn, let me know about your experience.
Yeah, so I come from a family of immigrants. My dad is from Colombia, and my dad's from Colombia, and my mom's from Guatemala. They both immigrated to the United States, of course, not knowing what the American education system would bring to both of their children. So as I had to navigate my ways of going into college, it was, again, unfamiliar territory for all of us, for myself included. I am the oldest in my family, so I had to go into these uncharted waters without understanding a single thing. So when it came around high school, everyone was already talking about what college they were going to go to. And when I saw those numbers of going into a university, I was very scared of what was to come. So that included in having conversation with my family of where my next steps would be into going to college. My next steps would actually end up being going into community college. At that time, it was a taboo of going into community college because it's not talked about. It's very frowned upon. Not anymore, luckily, but during my time of going into it, it was still something that came as a disappointment into my life for some reason. But understanding that when I got into that local community of my community college, it was a smaller community where I was able to navigate different resources. I was then able to understand what I wanted to do, which became into a passion of 2 years of communication. That's where I knew that's what I wanted my degree to be in. Going into both of those 2 years of community college, I got to meet different professors and talk to my counselors about my next steps. Around that time as well, I got to meet someone at my local church who is now a longtime friend. She was a Latina as well, and she had just completed her doctorate. And understanding her and where she came from, we got to share a lot of similar stories, which she then became a mentor for me. Being that mentor for me, she got to explain to me about what grad school was and what study abroad was. Those were two topics that I had no idea what they were until, again, my second year of college. Getting to know her, I then was able to transfer to Arizona State University. In that bridge gap, I got to, from community college to ASU, I was able to study abroad. And because of my love for travel, I was able to do that. But at the same time, I was able to strengthen my Spanish because, again, I come from parents who speak Spanish fluently. I want to strengthen that. But it sounds like all glory that, yes, I went from community college to study abroad to ASU. But during that time frame, I had to work 3 jobs. For me, for my personal story, scholarships were not a thing. It wasn't because of my academics. It was just something that scholarships would not come through. None of it would. So I had to go on and take out loans. I did have to understand how that process was, because as an 18-year-old, that's something so new that you have to go ahead and learn. And so again, I had to work 3 jobs and I had to take on what we now know as loans, right? From then on, coming back from Spain, strengthening my Spanish, I then continued on to finish off my 2 years at ASU. With alongside having the mentorship that I had from Dr. Thompson, she was able to help me navigate those 4 years. And then from then on, we got to talk about grad school. And because of her, again, I didn't know what grad school was. And so as I looked into programs, I got to understand that grad school was a lot of what you're passionate about. Communication has then become something so broad for me that I wanted to continue to understand it and hopefully be able to just utilize it more in my personal and professional life.
So Jocelyn, let me ask you, you just said, I didn't know what grad school was. So here you are, an undergraduate, you went from community college to university, you even studied abroad, but you were unsure of grad school without your mentorship experience with Dr. Thompson, as you say.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fascinating to me that, it's not something that we talk about. Like, it's interesting that isn't even a topic that's brought up. So then you went on to get your master's degree at GCU. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. So I decided to go ahead and apply to GCU. My brother had just recently graduated from GCU, but he wasn't really the main reason why I applied there. I really wanted to understand what the community was around in GCU, because it has been a school that has grown from the time of me learning about GCU, and then applying into GCU and then understanding what the academics would, help me out with my personal and my professional life. I can say that I'm proud that I was able to go ahead and apply here and be able to understand what GCU was about. They are a school that is definitely helping out the community in understanding where they're wanting to be in their next steps in life. And it's just a great school that I was able to be a part of and still am.
Well, I would say that if you like the school and you work for the school, then that's a double bonus right there.
Right there.
Well, so we'll learn a little bit about how GCU's experience with First Gens has been changing. But before we do that, Jocelyn, I know you have some great tips, and I'm going to ask a different question that I asked Jaron. How can K12 leaders improve the experience for first generation students? Now, I know that educators are also leaders, but I want you to talk to the administrators, the drivers of their educational institutions. How can they improve the experience for high school students? And then also you can talk about college students if you'd like to.
And I would even backtrack, it's never too early. Start talking to them from middle school. Get to know them. Get to know each of your students and have them get involved, whether it be in a local church, volunteering in a community fair, volunteering in their own school and clubs. And if you feel like that student isn't, getting the gist of getting involved, sit them down, get to know what their interests are. Every student has the capability to have an impact, whether they believe it or not. They are the future. They are the ones that are going to be standing in these future webinars that we have. So, have that sphere of communication with them. You're there for a reason as well.
That is fantastic. I love what you say here. Get to know them so you can help them find their fit. So in other words, kids don't know where they fit, and especially first gen students, immigrant students, students that don't see college in their future, they might not know where they fit. But if you get them interested in the marching band, or if you get them interested in, a debate club or something, they might find their fit there. So that's really great advice. And then finally, you say, stay humble and remember where you came from. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, this specific tip goes out to any student who is first generation. Once you get to the day of your graduation day, it's a happy moment. Remember that it's not only for yourself, but also for your family. Stay humble. Just because you now have a master's degree does not mean you're able to degrade someone who is not going to college or interested in college. Right now that you have this degree, it's time for you to pay it forward. And that means for you to now be that support system for your community. See how you can be a role model for the next generation. That's how I feel like that any first generation that is, upcoming in college, once it's that day that you're finally there, be able to remember where you came from.
I love it, Jocelyn. That's so beautiful. Well, almost Dr. Marette Hahn. I know you're still working on your dissertation in this area, but that was a phenomenal segue into maybe where we go next, what we do as university to create those role models that Jocelyn just referred to. And of course, she already is, as is Jaron. Could you wrap this up for us, Dr. Hahn? Almost, Dr. Hahn. Sorry,
Almost.
You're close. You're close. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And really, Jaron and Jocelyn's stories are beautiful, and they represent really well a lot of the research I've been reading through related to the first generation college student experience. And so two really common concepts that arise in the literature are the social and cultural capital needed to successfully navigate through higher education. So the social capital being the social network that a first generation college student either has or doesn't have that can help them navigate higher education. And then the cultural capital being the cultural understanding of how higher education operates. And oftentimes that culture, that system of higher education often conflicts with the upbringing that first generation college students experience. And so really understanding that these two versions of capital are so critical for these students to be successful in higher education. And so how do we really make sure we're providing that for them? It's less than 25% of first generation college students who don't return to continue their bachelor's degree. Less than 25% of them are dismissed for academic reasons. So it is not their ability that's keeping them from continuing on in higher education. A lot of times it's external influences. And so how can we as educational leaders make sure we're not only preparing them, but then also supporting them in their college journey and providing that college knowledge? So it can start with curriculum development for college preparation. What are those key phrases? I know Jaron mentioned applying for student aid. What does FAFSA mean? There are all these phrases we use in higher education, whether we work in higher ed or we've been through higher ed, that we throw out and just assume that everyone knows what we're talking about. And for first generation college students who have no guidance around what these phrases or terms mean, that can be really detrimental to their university experience and their persistence. So I think it's really important on the K12 side to make sure we are preparing them with that college knowledge and making sure that they're entering university with some kind of understanding of how it's going to go and what important resources they need to use. But then really once they land on that college or university campus, it's also really important that the university is stepping up and making sure we're providing the resources for these students to be successful. This gets tricky. We talked about it a little bit earlier about, I think Jaron mentioned utilizing resources. There's actually a lot of research out there indicating that first generation college students are less likely to use and engage with the campus resources than continuing generation students. And so it's so important to make sure we're not only educating these first generation students on the terms we use, but also the resources we're offering and the how and why it would be beneficial for them to utilize and engage with those resources. And then for a lot of students, actually Jocelyn just mentioned it, when these students graduate, it's not just for them, it's for their entire family. Oftentimes that's a cultural piece. It's making sure that these students are giving back to their family, that they're putting that group above the individual. And a lot of first generation college students are raised with that cultural value system. And so it's so critical that as university leaders and as K12 leaders that we're involving family in these discussions, in the process, making sure we can help family understand it's going to look different when your student is in college than it did when they were in high school, and trying to make sure those family members are aware of the challenges they'll be facing, and maybe they won't be able to contribute the way they've been able to in the past. And what might that look like? But then also on the other side, to Jocelyn's point earlier about remembering where you came from, making sure we're still honoring whatever commitments they might have for their families too. And then really, I think we can tie all this together by making sure we're training, both on the K12 side and the university side. This is where the paradigm shift comes in that Corey mentioned. A lot of research out there is referring to cultural mismatch. So we go back to that concept of cultural capital, students having the knowledge, that college knowledge, to persist and continue on and use the resources that are important for them. And often first generation college students are more likely to be low socioeconomic status. Not always, but they're more likely to be. And most low SES families have kind of this interdependent cultural value system. Well, higher education is very independent, valuing those independent norms. And so oftentimes when we drop these first generation college students into this higher education culture, there's something called cultural mismatch, which actually research shows that it leads to negative academic outcomes. And so making sure we're understanding where these students are coming from, how everyone is different, and making sure we're using inclusive language as both K12 and university educators to make sure that we're honoring that interdependent value system and why they might be pursuing that higher education.
Wow, like so much there. And I so appreciate the thoughtfulness behind that discussion. A couple of things I heard that I want to point out very specifically. Number one, you said that only 25% or roughly that percentage of students who are first gen drop out due to academic reasons. So that's huge to me. 75% is how we handle or how they navigate our system. I find that interesting because you ended with something that said inclusive language. So our faculty and staff need to use inclusive language to make sure that the students like Jaron and Jocelyn don't feel like they're foreign or, not supposed to belong in this system of college. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. A lot of the literature also talks about imposter syndrome, and a lot of first generation college students experiencing a sense of, I don't know if I belong here. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I can see the differences between myself and my peers, and they don't necessarily understand where I'm coming from. And there's some recent research focusing on sense of belonging and academic help seeking. And students who experience a higher sense of belonging are more likely to engage in academic help seeking behaviors. But we also know that academic help seeking leads to positive academic outcomes. So if we can make sure that we're supporting these students and understanding the university environment, and making sure that they're feeling that sense of belonging, and yes, you've made it here, you belong here, this is made for you to be successful, then we can definitely help them use those resources available to them and making sure that they end up being successful. One of the biggest things, to tie it back to that quote at the very beginning, if these students are starting, and Jocelyn mentioned taking out loans and scholarships weren't an option, if they start and take out those loans, but then they don't complete that degree, their earning power is lost. And now all of a sudden they have loans they have to pay back that didn't necessarily get them to where they thought they could be economically. And so there's so much importance around making sure if they start and that access is there, that they are able to complete so that they can make sure they can pay back those loans, but then also it's an incredible opportunity to end the cycle of poverty for many of these students. And so making sure they can give back to their families and really alter the trajectory of their family's life.
Oh, wow. Absolutely powerful. Thank you so much, Marette, for that. We could dig in a lot longer, and we hope to do something in addition to this webinar for you folks that are interested in this First Gen initiative, because Meritte's doing so much great work here at GCU surrounding that. And Jocelyn and Jaron, just to give you two a moment to say one more thing, you know, I love this concept of perseverance. I have a feeling that neither one of you stayed there. Well, I know that you didn't stay down on that bottom step, but I bet that there were a few times where you felt like, I want to do it, but I don't know how, or I can try, I'll try, and then you can, and I will. And I know both of you, you did it, because you are an incredible, you're both incredible employees. And I dare say, making some decent money at in your position. Don't give it away. Don't give it away. Anyway, Jaron and Jocelyn, any last final words?
I think for myself to finish is what the last tip I had said: stay humble, don't forget where you came from, and also remember, we're all on different paths, we're all on different journeys. Not one is better than the other. We're all, you know, in it together, but at the same time, we're on our own boat. And as Marette is doing here at GCU and starting the initiative of First Gen, as you enter college, or as teachers, you understand what college is for your students. Encourage them to also join first generation clubs that are going to be happening in their local campuses, so they'll be able to, you know, meet others who are and have experienced what they're navigating through college, so they don't feel alone.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Jaron, do you have any last words?
Yeah, totally. You know, if I could talk to first gen college students, or talk to myself back when I was starting this whole journey, I would say, you know, don't be afraid to admit that you don't know. You know, don't be afraid to admit that this is foreign, that this is unfamiliar, and that you've never been down this path and you have no sort of point of reference. You know, be willing to ask questions, be willing to seek out help. Because if you try to go at it on your own, and you try to puff your chest up and act like you can push through it by yourself, it's going to be a lot harder than it needs to be. So be willing to seek out help, and be willing to admit that this is a new journey that you're on.
Wow, Marette, are these two individuals just incredible? I say this, I know I'm dating myself. I'm older than all of y'all, but wow, right, Marette? Are you encouraged by these two individuals?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, literally what Jaron just said is incredible. You know, that imposter syndrome can be so strong, and it can keep people from reaching out and asking those questions because they're so afraid it will validate that they're maybe not supposed to be there, which is what they're thinking at the time. But in all actuality, you know, I've worked in higher education for going on 12 years now, and most of the people who are here in higher ed just want to see you succeed. So if you are willing to step out of your comfort zone, as Jaron also referenced, and ask those questions and seek out that support, we will be there for you and you can make it.
I love it. Well, on that note, we're going to go ahead and tell you why we exist. We want to empower, educate, and inspire you, our community, so you take action to fulfill your purpose and to serve others. We cannot do this without you. Thank you so much, educators who are watching this, and please don't hesitate to share it with someone else, especially those who are serving first gen students. Thank you, almost Dr. Hahn. I know you're still working on that dissertation, and I wish you the best of luck, and thank you for studying such an important topic. Thank you very much, Jocelyn and Jaron, for sharing your stories with us today. And don't forget, y'all, subscribe now for some more free PD. Till next time.